Welcome back to Truth Be Told. My name is Max, and I'm here with Dwight. And Dwight has several questions to ask. So start asking, and I won't have the answers, but we're gonna at least talk about it. So
Yeah, I remember, Max, about probably 6 years ago, you said, you made a comment about asking questions. And those asking those questions that make you think and make you think outside of the sphere of influence or the sphere of thought that you normally think in. And so I written down a number of questions as we had a bit of a discussion here. And so I want to ask, how do we reach those that are outside of our natural circles? We have natural circles that are family. We have natural circles that are friends. We have, there are people that have natural circles that are their ethnic group, and yet Jesus was far different than that. And that's one of the things that really stood out to me when I was reading about Jesus. Like, he didn't shun the Romans, and he didn't shun the Samaritans. He didn't shun those that were out. He didn't shun the tax collectors, and he didn't shun the prostitutes. And so how do we live Jesus, and how do we bring Jesus into those that are outside of our natural circles?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's the question, because I think, I'm just going to share a little bit of my growing up. I used to feel very strongly, it's like, okay, and I don't know if this is shaped because of how I grew up or what it is, but it's like, okay, what can we do as a church to outreach? I'm not saying that that's a bad thing.
Yep.
But it was kind of limited to, the church has to be the one to do that. And when I say church, I mean, as a church unit, we got to go do these things. But I really think sometimes we discount the fact that just looking at Jesus' life, he went to the ones. He met every single person that he met on the front end. Before the crowd started following him, he met the ones at the low points of their life or where they were at. Abby and I were just talking about Matthew. Okay, no big whatever. He's Jewish, but he would have been not very liked in the Jewish communities at that time because he was collecting taxes for the Romans. So it's kind of like the opposite. He's doing the opposite of what he technically should have been in his culture. But Jesus met him regardless, saw him for who he was. Until Jesus saw him, he didn't turn and follow. After that, we can see the history of that now.
It's interesting that so much of what Jesus did was countercultural.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What he said, how he lived, what he did, and so on. And you're talking about something about the way that we grow up, and I think about an old expression that says, "Don't drink, smoke, or chew, or associate with those who do." And as if that was somehow that was to make us more like Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And but when we think about it, let's think about some of the ways that Jesus moved outside of what would have been his natural circles. I think about when he's speaking to a group of people. He's in a home, and I don't know how full the home was, and I don't know who the people were inside of the home, but his mother and his siblings come to there, and and they're trying to pull him out.
Yeah, and they say, "Your mother and siblings are here," and Jesus says, "Who is my mother and brothers and sisters?" And then proceeds to speak to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me some of the people, you talked about Matthew, but tell me some of the people that Jesus sought to reach, but it really moved outside of that circle. And I think of when you're reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you look at the number of people that are outcasts and those that are outsiders and those that some of them are downcast. And looking at those, who are they? How does Jesus meet them? And how does that apply to us? Because we can read that and we can still stay in our own circle.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. One thing that just came to mind, because I often forget about this story, but I was thinking about Jesus speaking to the crowd, and Zacchaeus is there in the tree, and he called him out individually, separately.
Who is Zacchaeus?
He's a tax collector, I believe, right?
Okay.
As well.
Chief tax collector.
Chief tax collector. That's so okay. Chief tax collector. So top of the top, and not necessarily a straight one either. So he called him out and spoke to him, and there's amongst the crowd. So that would have been the crowd, but then also, his circle would have been the disciples. I got thoughts running through my head. I'm trying to sort them out. But he spoke directly to him and brought transformation. Other people would have seen that, but he was not focusing on everybody.
Can I take you back for just a second, and then we can enter into where you are. But what's amazing to me, and we talk about practical ways, Jesus invited himself to Zacchaeus' house.
Yeah.
He said, come on down. I'm going to your house today. I'm going to, and there's something about somebody inviting you to their home or you inviting them to your home that you're stepping outside of that boundary, right? And when you have them into your home, and the gift of hospitality that you may have. So Jesus steps outside and he invites himself. And what would have been the response of the average person that was watching this?
They would have been like, well, don't associate with that person. Like, it would have been, I'm trying to think of an example today, but basically anybody that we wouldn't normally want to associate with, and we're entering into their life, basically.
Yeah, and going back to what you said before as well, it's amazing how many times that Jesus meets people where they are. Not necessarily where they want to be, right? And so let's just a few thoughts. Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus. That's why he climbed up into the tree. He didn't want to get in. And the scripture says he was short. I don't know how short he was. But being in that crowd of people where he was not wanted, because he was a he was tax collector and a chief tax collector. So he climbs up into the sycamore tree, and so that he can see Jesus, and Jesus meets him there. He's an outsider, he's an outcast, and from that society, right? And so he goes, Jesus meets him where he is. Can you think of some other people that Jesus meets them where they are, not necessarily where they want to be, because in our lives there's a lot of times where we're in a mess, we're in a place, and we're going, yeah, how do I get out of this? So,
well, we were discussing this before, but the woman at the well is a really strong example for that, because she's there, and I don't know the exact situation, but there wouldn't have been anybody else there, and she would have went there alone.
Why?
Well, she was she wasn't a prostitute, but she was divorced. How many times?
5 times.
5 times.
Live in common law.
Live in common law. So,
so the woman would not naturally wanted, kind of
wouldn't-
that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
don't
She would've
drink, smoke, or chew, or associate with those who do.
Exactly.
Because they're looking at her lifestyle. Again, she's in a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And-
people probably in the community would have known that.
And avoided her for that very reason, right? And who knows? We don't know the backdrop to her story. We don't know what the case was with those 5 men that had been her husband or the man that she's living common. But Jesus meets her where she is.
Yeah.
She's thirsty.
Yeah.
She's there for water. He offers her living water. He offers her eternal water, and which is him. But he meets her where she is.
And she was a Samaritan too, right? Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that was the other layer, because I remember her saying to Jesus, a Jewish man, giving her, like, being there with her would have been.
So why didn't
they wouldn't have associated?
So they were going from Jericho to Jerusalem, and typically, if you look at the map, you'll see that from Jericho to Jerusalem is a straight line down, is the shortest distance. Shortest distance from point A to point B is a straight line. And it says, but the Jews would go around that because of the Samaritans. And so the scripture says he must needs go through Samaria. Okay, and he's on his way down, and he says to his disciples, why don't you go to McDonald's and get us some lunch? So why doesn't Jesus invite his disciples?
I would think they weren't. Well, they haven't seen that. We would have had preconceived judgments. They would have had a lot of
Prejudice?
yes, that's the word. towards that situation that I don't think they were quite prepared for.
So, yeah. So first of all, it's a Samaritan. She's a woman. Her background, her lifestyle, but it's interesting as we introduce people to Jesus, as we find ways to meet them where they are, in the middle of their mess. And if we're all honest, we all got messes in our lives, right? Some of them are present, some of them are past, some of them will be future yet. But when watching this, as Jesus meets her, she goes back into the very city where she's been ostracized, or the very community that she's been, and she goes to the group of men. What's unusual about that?
Going back to the men that she would have been married with.
There's
in the
probably some of
past.
them there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah,
She goes back and she enters back into where they are, and in a small community, there's a good chance that 1 out of the 6 of them at least is part of that group of men that she goes, and she says, you come and see a man that told me everything I've ever done. And they go, what? And
but she wasn't ashamed of that. I think so. Coming to this, we were talking about this earlier. Is the truth will? This is the thought that just came to me. Truth will set you free.
Yeah.
Okay. Jesus says this. Scriptures say this. And if we can if we can be a part of somebody's mess, and they feel comfortable enough to share the uncomfortable things with us, which is the truth.
Yeah.
But without judgment.
Can I force you to go a step further in your thought here?
Definitely.
And that would be that Max, how often God uses our past with all of its pain to help minister to someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yes, and because if I go through this, and somebody else is going through that, I will not have the same the prejudice, the judgment that maybe somebody else that has never been through that to understand and meet that person where they're at, so that they feel comfortable enough to share the uncomfortable truths that they're going through.
She went back and she said, come and see a man, and she brought the whole town to see Jesus. And that's the truth to be told. I think we want to pick this up maybe in another one and talk a bit more about how do we, how do we use natural circumstances, and how do we use what's not natural to minister to people? We've looked at Jesus with the woman at the well. We've looked at Jesus with Zacchaeus, with Matthew, and so maybe we'll come back to that again
Definitely.
in one of our next episodes. And so,
Yes, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you guys in the next